Hey guys, I'm Wilson from C Skills, and in this video I'm going to be showing you the simplest approach to making 90% of all sounds you hear using a 3-step process. If you're having difficulty remaking sounds from your favorite songs, this is one of the easiest ways to think about sound design in general and get you closer to the ultimate goal of sound design, which is being able to create sounds from your head. So let's get started with the first step, which is recognizing where the sound is in the natural to synthetic spectrum. This allows you to distinguish whether you need to synthesize the sound or use live instruments and samples. Now, technically speaking, almost all sounds can actually be created through synthesis, but based off of time and practicality, it's not worth it to try synthesizing something like a guitar or a xylophone sound, unless if you just don't have the instruments or samples to actually create the sound. So I'm going to play some examples to show you the extreme ends of the synthetic spectrum. Then here are some examples from the natural ends. Sometimes you need to use a combination of both synthetic and natural approaches to the design depending on the sound you're trying to make. So for example, there are sounds closer to the middle where you need to process the sample of the sound using plugins to get a semi-synthetic effect on a natural sound. Now for step 2, the easy part is that if it's a purely natural sounding sound, then great, you can just skip to step 3 because you don't actually need to make the sound. If it's a synthetic sound, you need to figure out if the sound is based off of 3 basic sounds, which are a sine wave, a saw wave, or a square wave. For those of you who don't know, a sine wave is just one single frequency. A saw wave contains all the harmonics in the sound, and a square wave just contains the odd number of harmonics, so half the amount of harmonics in a saw wave. Almost all synthetic sounds are based off of one of these 3 sounds. So for example, here's a sine bass sound. Here's a square bass sound. And here's a saw bass sound. Something to note is that you'll find that a producer tends to lean towards one of these 3 basic sounds based off of their synthetic style. So the question is, what are you? Are you a sine, saw, or a square wave producer? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now the final third step is applying the effects. The 2 major attributes to think about are how clear the sound is and how distorted the sound is. If the sound is muddled, chances are there's going to be a detune effect applied to it, like in this Flume song. As opposed to the Swedish House Mafia song. The more distorted your sounds, the more you're going to get a sound similar to sort of a static in-your-face type of sound, similar to the Martin Garrix song right here. So once you've completed these 3 steps, you should already have 95% of the sound completed. And all that's really left to do is adjust the sound a little to fit your own tastes and mix the sound into your own song. Now there are special situations in step 2 where the sound is based off of a combination of a square and saw wave. And to show you this, I'm going to demonstrate making the sound in the Chainsmokers and Coldplay song, something just like this, so you can see the 3-step process of designing the sound. So I'm going to be designing the sound using the native FL Studio synthesizer Harmor. Now even if you don't have this specific synthesizer, realize that most synthesizers will have the same basic features like choosing waveforms, applying low pass filters or detunes, etc. So you can still follow along even if you don't have Harmor. So we're going to first start by listening to the drop of something just like this to hear what we need to remake when it comes to the lead sound. So starting with the first step of the process, we can already see that we don't think that the sound is going to be a natural sound. We probably think it's going to be somewhere between a saw wave or a square wave. So we're going to go towards a synthetic approach to making this sound. So I already brought up my Harmor instance, and I'm going to start by first playing the chords using the basic saw wave. So comparing the sound, I noticed that the original has highlighted harmonics on specific notes that resemble sort of a square wave sound. So I'm going to be adding a second harmon instance and creating a square wave drone on those highlighted notes. Now before moving on to the third step, I'm going to change the envelope of the sound so that it fits with the original. And you can see with this envelope, we have a little bit of a longer attack with the high sustain and low release. Now looking at the final third step, we're going to notice the effects of the sound. And we're going to notice right away that comparing this sound with the original, that the original has a lot less clarity when it comes to that saw wave, but a little bit more clarity on that square wave. And we're going to implement that by going into our saw wave and creating a unison. Now the square wave is going to have a unison as well, but we're going to increase the clarity by decreasing the pitch. Now with the distortions, we're going to notice that the original sound does have some static energy, so we're going to apply a little bit of distortion on both of our sounds. So like I said before, by the third step, you should already have sort of 95% of that sound already done. So we're going to see what this sounds like. And right away you can see that the sound already sounds a lot like the original. The only thing we really need to do is apply some mixing onto the actual sound. Now I'm not going to go over that in this video because this is more about the process of sound design, but this is what the sound sounds like when you mix it. So let's break down the steps. The first thing we did is figure out where the sound is when it comes to being natural or being synthetic. In this case, we know that it's synthetic, which is why we're using a synthesizer. The second step is figuring out what type of sound it is. Playing the song, we know that it's not a square saw based sound, but actually a mixture of both. So we started with a combination of both of these sounds. Finally, the third step is to see whether the sound has clarity and distortions. We see that the sound does have some muddleness, so we apply some detune. We sort of heard that static noise effect in the actual sound, so we created a small distortion. Now again, with this 3-step method, you should be able to reproduce almost 90% of all sounds out there. The other 10% of sounds use something called FM synthesis, which allows you to make your own unique waveforms to achieve sounds found usually in dubstep. That's more of an advanced sound design topic that we'll get into in another video. Anyway,